Welcome. Oh, hang on. Not yet. Can I ask a favour from all our listeners? B Squared, the company behind the SENDcast, are up for an Education Today award for Best Supplier of ICT Software for our connecting steps. If you are listening to this episode before the 30th of September, can you please vote for us in the Education Today Awards by going to educationtodayawards.co.uk/vote. You'll also find the link in the show notes. Please vote for us. And I will now hand over to me to get on with the podcast. Welcome to the SENDcast. My name is Dale Pickles. I'm the host of the SENDcast and one of the directors here at B Squared. If you are a new listener, then welcome to the SENDcast. Now, this is a special episode. It's not one of our weekly normal episodes that goes out on Thursday. And in this podcast, we are just raising the profile and giving an idea of what will be included in our free SENDcast sessions, Send Briefing on the 24th of September. That's a video online CPD live session with Jane Friswell. And she'll be taking us through what will the new government mean for SEND. The SENDcast is created and produced by us here at B Squared. We have a range of products to help schools. We have our assessment software, our evidence of learning and communication system. We have this podcast. We have our CPD sessions and more. Visit the B Squared website or click on the meeting link in the show notes to book a meeting with me to take you through all the things B Squared do and how we can help you. Now, let's get on with this special episode. In this special episode, we're raising the profile of our free Send Briefing on September the 24th. And we're looking at what does the new government mean for Send? Joining me is Jane Friswell, who'll be delivering the session on the 24th. And Jane is an educational consultant who is hugely experienced in a range of all areas around SEND. And one of those people you can fire any question at, and she will always have an answer for you with lots of supporting information. And Jane is one of those people who will always be on my speed dial list when it comes to SEND. Welcome to the show, Jane.
Thanks very much, Dale, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You are welcome. So you deliver a briefing for us every September on what changes are happening around the world of SEND. And maybe before May, you thought, it's a nice small update. SEND AP plodding along. And then the election was announced and everything is all changed. But we still don't know what is changing. So what are we going to be going through in September?
Well, I think, firstly, I would like to just share that I am reasonably impressed with how the new government has started, to govern.
Yes.
I feel that they have been quite forthright. They have shown good evidence of planning, of thinking ahead prior to actually getting into government. And that gives me a small degree of heart. Okay, so it gives me just this tiny little hope that was more or less extinguished formally, that just says, okay, there is this flicker that is going to turn into a flame and it is actually going to ignite a fire under those in government that have any responsibility for SEND. So, and I really hope that happens. I really hope we can start to put the fire back in the bellies of those that govern. And we think about education policy really, really broadly and laterally and inclusively. And I think one of the great markers for that within just the first few weeks of the new government being in place is the fact that the DFE shift from that silo way of operating as a children and families team within DFE, taking the responsibility for all things SEND, now shifting very much into the schools' departmental arrangements for education. So I think that is to be really, really welcomed, because I think that gives us a really good indicator of where Bridget Phillipson's, the new Secretary of State for Education's head is at, and where her thinking is at, and where her team's thinking is at.
Definitely. And I was on a National Association Special Call, had like an online conference on the 4th of July. And somebody's kind of saying that, well, where we are in the calendar year is this will go through, and then about a week and a half later, they're all going to be off on their summer holidays, and they'll get back from the summer holidays, and then it's party conference season. And they said, kind of, you probably won't expect to see anything till October. And then all of a sudden, loads of stuff was coming out. So those changes, you had the King's Speech, the curriculum and assessment review was announced, other things were coming out in the Guardian around behaviour changes they want. And it was like, they're not having a slow start. They're going for it.
No. And they're not letting the grass grow under their feet, which I think is really important. There's been talk of an Inclusion Institute, which I find incredibly exciting. That if we can have a government-backed Inclusion Institute, and if they've got the right people around the table, and some of those people have been, forgive me, friends who I'm probably about to name, we've been knocking around the block for quite a few years now. But, where's Mel Ainscough at the government's table? His Index for Inclusion, for example, is something that I have eaten and breathed right from the first moments that I trained as a teacher. And I took a very specific route into teaching that enabled me as a teacher under the then Department for Education and Science. And for those of us that were old enough on the call, they might remember the old DES. But they funded a 10-year period, Dale, of teachers like me being specifically trained to teach children with quite profound and complex levels of need and disability. And I felt really privileged to be able to access that training at the time as a student teacher. And I can always remember one of our head of colleges saying to me at the time, "Oh, Jane, teachers like you are going to be treated like gold dust, because we're going to be few in number." And the funded period that the DES provided was only 10 years. So there was only a small cohort really across that 10-year period that went out into the schools of the nation to try and make a difference, and improve the quality of education that primarily was being delivered within our special school sector at the time. Well, I don't believe I've ever been treated like gold dust, nor would I want to be. But I do think, the talent that we have in the workforce, both within the special sector and within the mainstream sector, is undervalued and underrated, and consequently undersold. So I think there's something in the government, in the new government's approach, where we have to get back to recognising the value of the sector's offer, and also listening to the sector. I was talking to somebody the other day, Dale, about the fact that they were asking me the question, what is it you want for your loved ones with additional needs and disabilities, Jane, out of life? And I said, it's quite simple. I just want them to have an ordinary life.
Yep.
And sometimes that means we have to make some extraordinary decisions. It takes us to places where we get involved with extraordinary people who have extraordinary talents, but actually we simply want an ordinary life. And the other line that I trot out, and I think I trotted this out last September, and I can't take any credit for this line at all because it was a colleague's friend that shared this with me, is that we've got to get back to the basics of simply, when we identify the needs of children and young people as SEND, and I think there's going to be a shift on that as well to come from this new government, that I think we're going to move away from that labelling culture. But when we do identify children and young people as having needs that constitute SEND, that require additional to or different from provision arrangements, that we have to get the idea of giving them what they need as soon as they need it.
Yes.
Because we that links then, doesn't it, to that whole issue around not getting in early enough, not identifying needs clearly enough. And I think what we're going to see from this government is a real push down that early intervention route. And I would hope some enabling arrangements with regards to how we resource that effectively too. And I think, if we're going to talk about resources, which I hope we are, that has to start with writing off debt from local authorities that currently, in the safety valve programme. So we've got to write that off. And I think we've also got to write off a load of debt and look at the deficits that are massive, just mind, mind-bogglingly, eye-wateringly huge for local authorities to manage. They can't. They are operating in a straitjacket at the moment of trying to pay back the paymaster, as well as trying to deliver good quality services to children, young people, and their families for SEND. And you simply can't do that. You can't do that with both hands tied behind your back.
No.
So there has to be a government decision, a Secretary of State's decision, a Treasury decision that says we've got to start from a new datum with this new government. Now, with that is going to come increased responsibilities and accountabilities, I have no doubt. And that's absolutely right when you think about the scale of the public money involved here. But I think that we have to start with ring fencing resource allocations in schools with the label of SEND, because at the moment that doesn't happen. And that can lead to lots of freedoms that head teachers have in terms of the decisions that heads and governors make around how they allocate their resources for SEND. But I think that in itself, there's a bit of a black hole there anyway, because I don't think it's fair that we've got head teachers, and they may not raise their hands at this point in the conversation, but we can't expect all head teachers to be great accountants.
No.
And we can't expect all school business managers to have a really good understanding of what looks like a good financial decision in the name of SEND. So we've got to have a fairly sort of open conversation about that, of what looks like good spending on SEND, and how we can sort of really promote good practice around that.
And one thing I liked about talk about good practice is that the curriculum and assessment review, the lead is from the Education Endowment Foundation, a very much evidence-based organisation. And so that gave me a lot of hope that they're kind of choosing the right people and not just doing popular things, but using actually, let's look at what the evidence is telling us and let's go down that route.
Yeah, and it was interesting, wasn't it? Because I think the appointment of Sir Kevin Collins as a non-exec board member at DFE, we not only welcome that announcement, but also contained in the same DFE press release was that welcome news that I've just referred to earlier about SEND and inclusion was restructured to a place of responsibility for SEND and AP within the DFE schools group. So I think, whilst the two announcements were presented in the same press release, I think there is a connection there.
Yes.
Maybe I'm just overthinking it, Dale. Who knows? But I think we've had this sort of real sense of, I think we called it silo working, didn't we, earlier in the conversation? But actually, when you think about some of the real lived experience of many of the families that I've worked with and supported and taught their children, there is this high sense of being othered, of being seen as less than when it comes to some of their experiences around SEND.
Yeah.
And I think the same can be said of SEND policy. It's quite ironic, isn't it, that we've got this sort of SEND policy position from the previous government almost reflect lived experience reflections of families and children and young people with SEND. So I think, this idea that we can make decisions around SEND and how SEND affects the lives of children, young people and their families, we can do that in isolation from core education policy is a nonsense. We can't do that.
No.
It has to be right at the heart of education policy.
Definitely. So it sounds like you've got a lot to talk about.
Haven't I always?
Just start, hit the button, start, wind her off, and off she goes. But there's a lot to talk about. I think there's a lot of optimism around. There's a lots of things are going to change. And part of me is always that grass is always greener, but I kind of was a bit fed up of being told it has to be this way. I'd like to be someone else. And if they find out, oh, actually, it has to be that way, then that's great. But let's try something else, because what's currently working wasn't working. We need to try something else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if we think about some of the reform around Ofsted, Labour was proposing pre the election, almost like a report card style sort of model, and that having an increased focus on provision and progress of pupils with SEND, particularly around some of the standards that we know schools should be meeting regarding the strategic role and implications of the SEND code.
Yes.
How inclusive we are around admissions, access to the curriculum, some of our equality objective setting, and also the arrangements that we make for extracurricular provision and how inclusive that is. So I think there are ways and means, I think, where the new Labour government is going to be able to overlay its influence with that SEND agenda in mind to try and better connect the dots, really, of some of the operations of how we monitor and review and continue to improve the quality of the offer for SEND across the country. And I think Ofsted is one part of that, not entirely all of it. It'd be interesting to see what the government response is to the late outcomes on the change programme partnerships.
Yes.
Because I think that varies, around the regions. Wakefield have just had a great local area SEND inspection outcome, and that's great. And they're one of the change programme partnership local areas. I think there are some change partnership programmes that are struggling, and I think there needs to be a bit of honesty around that as to why. And I think it bothers me a little bit that we can't have that sort of honest account of, even though a local area is in receipt of what looks like an enormous amount of public money, and it is indeed an enormous amount of public money, and yet they are judged to be a failing local area. Essentially, they've made insufficient progress when their performance comes under scrutiny. I think we still need to ensure that we've got an honest broker's role in place, because I think that puts local areas where their performance is slow to improve under enormous pressure, because what it hides is usually, in my experience, an enormous amount of hard work going on behind the scenes, desperately trying to improve as quickly as possible, desperately trying to better connect with local families, children and young people, desperately trying to adopt a culture that is much more relational, in its approach. And all of those things take an enormous amount of time. And I think one of the things that I think most of us perhaps don't recognise at national level is the considerable churn that is taking place, at local authority level, both in terms of leaderships, responsible officers, senior responsible officers. There's a lot of jobs out there that have been filled, then become vacant, filled, and then become vacant again. And often you'll get an interim post holder filling that spot, for 6 months, 12 months, and then if they can't recruit. So the recruitment crisis is not just at school level, it's at local area level too. So we've been really sort of foiled by this lack of consistency, really, of being able to sort of fulfill our local job of providing a consistently good offer for SEND.
There's so many questions I'd love to ask about how a role is coming up every 6 months in a local authority. I mean, if that was somewhere else, you'd be going, there's a really big problem there. Problem is, as you said, we're not having those honest conversations. Is it an unachievable role? Is it too much to learn? Is there not enough knowledge already there to learn from? Are the processes not there? Is there pushback from other departments? Because the problem is you can't just walk in and say, we need this, 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 and this, and then someone go, well, we have no money. We can't do it. It's a really complex conversation.
It is, but it's also a conversation that needs to happen between schools and other service providers, health and care particularly, and the local authority. And I was hoping that the role of the ICB would really sort of, fine tune that and improve the situation quite dramatically at local level. I think in some areas it's done some really good things, but I think others have been slow, to move. So I think that role of the local area being seen very much as the epitome of a a multi-agency, a collective working in a partnership is still not consistent enough.
No.
So so therefore, and I think Special Needs Jungle talk about the postcode lottery, don't they, in terms of, what you're going to get as a pupil with SEND depends very much on where you live, and the quality of the offer depends very much on where you live. I think there is some truth to that, but I don't think that's necessarily all to put the blame at the door of schools. I think that's often a reflection of what's actually happening within the local area. And I think the other thing to remember is that, as a former head, I understand for schools, and particularly for mainstream schools, how tricky it must feel to be a school leader who is operating and leading a highly inclusive school. Because, it's great. I want to celebrate every single one of them in the country. But actually, the system is set up not to reward them.
No, they will be getting told off by the local authority because they're not doing well in the league tables, because they're not doing this.
Exactly. And so as a consequence, what does that mean for the type of leaders that we require in school, who are advocates of social justice, who are advocates for the vulnerable, and who are champions, really, for change? What that requires is bold, brave leaders.
Yep.
And I think when you're tired, and when you are looking at your minimized level of resource, and when you are potentially operating a deficit budget, which many of our schools are these days, you're on your uppers. You feel on your uppers. So to ask them to be bold and brave and courageous at a time where they feel utterly decimated and depleted is simply unfair. And it's not going to happen. So again, that honest conversation that I've mentioned earlier, we have to know exactly how it is. And we also have to have local senior responsible officers who truly know what the challenge looks like from the school's perspective. And, the number of hats that I wear, both as a parent, as a sibling carer. I get it. I get how difficult life is at a local authority level. I understand the pressures, both financial and also people-wise and policy-wise, that local authorities are under. I may not like it when it affects me and mine, but at least I understand it, and I can have an empathy with those that I'm working with to a degree when I'm wearing my parent hat or my, big sister hat. So I think I'm quite unusual in that regard, because what that does for me as an individual is it enables me to be much more reflective about the ask that I'm asking for. And I think generally we are reasonable as a people. I come back to my pursuit of the ordinary life for me and mine, and I genuinely believe that's what most parents of children, young people with additional needs, SEND, a disability, a range of complex, profound needs, that's what they want. But we've got to agree what that ordinary life looks like. That ordinary life for me looks like promoting independence, because I don't and I can't look after you forever.
Yes.
So my gift is to support you in achieving whatever independence looks like for you in life.
Yes.
Okay? At whatever level of ability you are operating at. And for me, that's why I am quite a strong voice in this whole notion of additional one-to-one support is the panacea for all ills in our failing support system for SEND, when we know that it isn't. And every shred of educational research, will support that view. So, but trying to shape that view within our parental populations, our family populations, our school populations particularly, because throwing more and more adults in a classroom is not going to improve outcomes for children.
No.
Okay? Any of the kids, whether they've got SEND or not, because that just creates an environment of increased reliance, increased dependence, certainly much, much lower independence. And I think is extremely short-sighted, because for me, education is the range of experiences that we afford our children, young people, that they are entitled to receive. And it is absolutely the rehearsal ground for the rest of their life.
Definitely.
So any cock-ups, any major mistakes, we can make them within the confines of that safe structure that we call education, school, college, sixth form, wherever you are, you have that safety net around you. Because what we want to do is we want to be able to launch you into the next phase of your life, early adulthood, where you feel primed and ready to take on the challenges of early adulthood. And to come back to this new government, I think we're going to see a real champion around post-16 and preparing for adulthood. That's certainly what I detect from some of the speeches that Bridget Phillipson has made more recently. I think she recognises that, we've got an offer for SEND in school that is structured in the way around, universal targeted specialist provision arrangements, universal provision, SEN support. And if we require anything over and above that, then largely that tends to lead to an education healthcare needs assessment leading to a plan, for example. And I don't necessarily agree that that's the case in all cases, but nor should it be. But nevertheless, the more intense your level of need becomes, then actually the more intense it is likely that you're going to need additional resource. Yep. And that's right. That's right. We should be driving a system where our limited amount of resource is being spent on those that need it most.
Yes.
Okay. And I get that. But of course, when you feel that you are fighting for your child in a system that either isn't listening to you or isn't sharing the views that you have about your child, then you are going to want to fight for what you believe to be, the best possible package of support. But as I say to most parents that I work with, this is the here and now we're talking about. I want you to think about the 25th birthday.
Yes.
And I've told you that story about, my son when he was 12, haven't I? Do you want me to share it again? And when he was 12, he told me that he was going to live with us till the age of 37. So he'd got a 25-year plan. And I have no idea to this day why the arbitrary age of 37 came into his mind, but that was what he stated. And on that very day, that light bulb went off in my head. And I thought, oh my God, I've got 3 children. I don't want any of them living with me to the age of 37. I don't give a monkeys about what level of need you have, but you need to be out of here. This is absolutely my mission as a parent. And I believe that is a sign of me being a successful, nurturing, enabling parent to enable them to go off and live the lives that they choose, whatever that looks like. But at that precise moment in time, Dale, I also had another thought, and a more significant thought, which was that he clearly had a 25-year plan, to live with us to the age of 37. What he didn't know at the time was that his father and I also had a 25-year plan, and Harry did not feature anywhere nearly as highly in our plan as we clearly did in his. And that has got to be right, hasn't it? And I often trot that little anecdote out for the very specific reason that we, as parents, we often, and certainly as parents of kids with SEND, we have to live in the here and now. Many of us can't think through to the end of the bloody day, let alone the end of the week, because we're constantly sort of on catch-up mode, and life can be incredibly unpredictable, incredibly stressful. It can feel very unsupported, depending on what your circumstances are. And so for us to be able to sort of think long term and to think from that 12-year-old's position through to 25th birthday, 30th birthday, 37th birthday, what are our aspirations for our children looking like from that 12-year-old, being a parent of a 12-year-old and looking forward to their 25th birthday? And that's where we've got to see what this added value of the SEND support arrangements for our kids is actually driving us to. Is it actually driving the pursuit of that ordinary life ambition? Is it driving us to the pursuit of preparing for adulthood? Of securing a job, getting a home, living a life independently, free from mum and dad, having loads of friends and feeling happy in life and being healthy and staying healthy and knowing how to do that for yourself. Because that's essentially, I believe, what we all want. We don't want to be reliant on specialist services for the rest of our days. We don't want to have to wait for a carer to arrive to be, the paid friend in our life. That's fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong in my eyes. Absolutely fundamentally wrong. So, for me, allocating TA support in a classroom is such a highly, highly skilled operation, because that TA is being allocated to do all the things to make that contribution in that child's life at that time with that long-sightedness.
Yes.
So that actually I'm really clear about what I'm doing as a TA in promoting your independence as a learner and enabling you to do much more tomorrow than you can do today.
I can't remember which one of my guests what it was, but basically told me a TA's role is to make themselves redundant.
Yeah.
And when you sit there and go, yes, actually, that is. They're not there to support English or maths. They are to literally make themselves redundant so they are not needed.
Yeah.
That is their role. And that's what, as you said, it's to be independent. It's, you don't rely on me to be able to make friends. You don't rely on me. You're more confident to just say to the teacher, I don't get it. Can you give me a bit of help? That's what it's about.
Yeah.
So I can't wait till September. I can't wait to sit there and...
I've tried not to give too much away, Dale.
Really?
There's loads more to talk about in September. Loads.
So if you haven't joined us for a SEND briefing before, what happens is Jane will deliver a talk with slides, which we will all follow through. I then get my own private chat with Jane, which you get to listen to as I reflect on things Jane's talked about. And then we have a Q&A that you can be part of. So on the 24th of September, 24th of September at 11:30, Jane will be starting. Jane will be delivering that talk and you can join us. If you can't join us on the 24th, the session is recorded and you can watch it whenever you want. Okay, so if you can't join us then, you can watch it whenever you want, and the Q&A gets recorded as well as a separate video, so you can go through and watch all of that. So thank you for coming on the show today, Jane.
You're welcome.
And you'll find a link to the free SEND briefing and how you can get involved in that in the show notes. You can book your place, and you'll find the show notes, as always, wherever you listen to the podcast or on the SENDcast website. Thank you for listening to the show. If you haven't subscribed already, click on that subscribe button. You can follow us on various social media, so Twitter or X. We are the SENDcast. On Facebook, the SENDcast. On Instagram, the SENDcast. And as always, if you are struggling to show progress, if you have an assessment process that is overcomplicated, takes too long, or you just want to see what's available, have a look at the B Squared website or book a free online meeting with me so I can take you through our products. We have a range of assessment products to help all schools show small sets of progress for pupils with SEND. You can also find about our online training, read our blog, watch our webinars, and more. It is all on the B Squared website. You'll find a link to the website and to book a meeting with me in the show notes as well. So thank you for listening. We'll be back soon with another episode of the SENDcast. This is goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from me. Bye.
Bye.